Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Okay. So our first question comes from Paul Santemeyer, who actually wrote the ELCA's 1993 social statement on climate justice.
Mhm.
He asked, Lutherans are known for lifting up Romans 1:17 about the just living by faith, which is, for in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. What is your favorite Earth Care text and why?
I thought that was an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Revelation, and the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. I like that. But I really sort of stuck on at the very end of Jonah. Jonah was complaining, and this is terrible, and doggone it, they listened to God, they repented. I'm so angry. That's so funny and petulant. But when God is talking to a couple times in that story, all of the inhabitants, including the animals, put on sackcloth and ashes. So that the animals were not separate from the community. I like that. But at the end, when God is gently but firmly letting Jonah know what the stakes were here, he says, all these thousands of people who don't know their right hand from their left, and they would be gone. And he said, and much cattle. So that tender inclusion of non-human parts of the creation, I always like that little "and much cattle" part. It seemed to me in that part when the whole community was in repentance because there had been a break between the community and God, and that affected all of the community, including the non-human part of the community. I don't think the animals had put on sackcloth and ashes. They probably didn't do anything wrong, but I thought that was neat.
That was really a perfect segue to the second question, which I have to admit I was hesitant to throw in anything to do with animal welfare because the whole meat eating issue is pretty taboo to talk about in mixed company. But since listening to the Good Shepherd message, the general question regarding the welfare of farmed animals and the people who work in that industry really came up for many of our questioners. So do you know, does the ELCA have resources that can help raise up these complicated issues around industrial farming? Maybe what have you learned when you were with those ranchers?
Mm-hmm.
What ways can you think of that can faithfully encourage conversation about all this and intersections?
Yes. Right now we have an ELCA Witness and Society team, and they're conducting listening sessions, learning more about the realities and challenges for Lutherans with vocations in agriculture. Um, we made a statement, make a statement on everything, but factory farms, I don't think that they're sustainable. And so when I was with this rancher who was trying to be more sustainable, not only would he rotate the cattle so they wouldn't overgraze, but he also was trying to mitigate. I mean, there are a lot of cattle byproducts. They just end up in a pool. It's going to affect the groundwater. So he was trying to do that. And his neighboring, both of them, a man and a woman, and their neighbors were not necessarily doing that, nor were they restoring the original, getting rid of the invasive species and restoring the original grasses. So we know that we're trying to listen around the country to what people are doing. We give a grant to the National Farm Worker Ministry, and it's part of its agenda is to protect and promote the rights and well-being of farm workers. So that's important. Let me see. There's tons of Humane Society faith resources, HSFR, from the ELCA, and I think Roger Willer is a person to talk to about that. We take a look, especially in these HSFR What is the relationship, for clues for the relationship between God and God's creation? And I think a lot of us, and me included, I included, read so quickly over Genesis chapter 1 that we get to the part where male and female are created, and God said, "Behold, it is very good." However, before human beings ever came on the scene, God called the creation good, very good. So that's an important part, especially when I think that we've become, in a lot of ways, so disassociated from our place amongst and amidst the creation. Luther, this is not scripture, but Luther had this great quote, which I'm going to butcher anyways, but he says the entire divine presence is in every, Barbara, you could help me with the quote if you can think about every creature more deeply, more intimately, more inwardly, more completely than the creature is to itself. And so when I first heard that, actually from Cynthia Molabita at a Bishop's Academy, and it made me think about that the divine nature is in all of creation. And when we somehow separate ourselves or try to separate ourselves out from being one part of the creation, we're actually separating ourselves out from God. It's a detachment from God. So that's my Luther thing. Luther also thought that doggies go to heaven, so I'm happy about that. So there's a whole quote on that.
He did?
Oh yeah. What do you say? Be thou comforted, little dog, for in heaven thou too shall have a golden tail.
I love how you know that quote.
I hear people typing too.
I'm typing. I didn't know about this.
I think it could have been in a table talk, would be my guess, or something. I don't know if I can see it, but that's there. I first heard it from Marcus Lorman. You know, those Missouri Synod people, they know they're Luther, so he could just quote that pretty quickly.
You gave a lot of resources too, and out of the listening sessions, where will we, and maybe this isn't figured out yet, but what's coming out of those listening sessions? Where do we hear more about that? And
that I don't know. That's a good question. I will ask Roger and have him get in touch with you.
Excellent.
It'd be good to know.
Pat, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually I did. I hope it's not inappropriate, but the whole strand of the conversation there about bringing the animals in and farmers and all of that made me wonder. I'm sure that this is a data point that is known. I hope somebody on this call here, Bishop, if not you, somebody else might know this. How do I put this? What's the penetration of the ELCA into American farm life? Or I guess another way, are we more represented or less represented than other churches among American farmers?
I think that depends on the region of the country. Certainly in the Dakotas, there's probably a pretty significant representation of Lutherans. I think places in the South that there aren't that many Lutherans, I would guess. I don't know how it is in California, but there are fewer Lutherans there. We've got farmers all over the country, but in places, we had our research and evaluation guy, Ken Inskeep, who's retired. He likes to refer to the fertile crescent of Lutheranism. And that's, Dakotas, Montana, coming around through, Minnesota, Wisconsin, wrapping around the Great Lakes, ending up in Ohio. And so my guess is that we have farm folks there. I don't know if you remember this, but there was this terrible freak blizzard in South Dakota in 2013 in October. And when that happened, 90,000 head of livestock were killed in that storm. It was devastating. But then we worked with Lutherans, social service folks, but also with farmers and ranchers, and I had a chance to visit them after that and to see they're pretty represented there. And I remember one in particular, this ranching family, and the son, you know, a grown child, he had a favorite blue roan cattle. You know, I'm a city girl, so I don't, you know, but he even of all the cattle they had, there was one that was his favorite, which I think did not survive the storm. But then they were looking at these animals, and when I went there, there's some of them, most of them had been buried, but there were still some frozen on the ground. They just looked like they were asleep. It was the saddest thing. And this rancher said, this is so heartbreaking for him because God had given them the responsibility to care and steward these animals in this land, and they couldn't do it because of the storm. They'd also received emails and other letters saying, I wish you would have died in the storm instead of the animals. So not always helpful. And then people said, why don't you put them in a barn? Well, I don't think they've ever seen a ranching operation. And these might be the same people who clamor for free range cattle. So, but no, I think that's where, I don't know how we would find out that. Someone would know that. I don't.
I was just wondering because you know, I'm certainly a city guy. You said you described yourself as a city girl, but it seems like knowing that would help us perhaps tailor our approach a little bit to some of these issues.
It could. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I certainly can speak to that, having spent my entire ministry in small town and rural ministry in synods where, when the synod I'm in now, which is, I'm 55 miles from where the bishop is, but this synod has 146 congregations. About 100 of them are small town and rural ministry sites. When I was in northwestern Wisconsin at the beginning of my ministry, there's Lutheran farmers all up and down in the Midwest, in Illinois, in Wisconsin, Minnesota. We have tons of them. The Norwegians and the Germans who came to this area came to farm, and they are still here. The congregation I sit in is an open air congregation, and there's lots of them like this. They are dying because of the changing agricultural scene and the larger farms and less people in the rural areas, but that's not because we don't have Lutheran farmers. We have lots of them. Mm-hmm. And certainly in the Midwest. And I would assume in Ohio too, but I don't know Ohio as much.
Interestingly enough, Ohio, I didn't know this until I was placed on the, sort of the agricultural ready bench, so we could go and, you know, advocate for, and that was like crazy because I'm not a farmer, but agriculture is the largest industry in Ohio still, even with all the science and technology and industries we've got up and going. And even now with the comeback of some of the steel and other manufacturing, it is. We do, what's not interesting, but a challenge for us is that at one point, one of the staff who I think a predecessor of Ruth's had suggested that the ELCA have meatless Mondays. And I'll tell you, the ranchers in the Dakotas, Montana, this was really not well received. So how, and I think this is maybe questions that you wrestle with all the time, these folks with whom I've met and others hearing from their bishops, and I have had like town hall meetings with these folks virtually and in person. They believe that their godly creation is to be a rancher or a farmer, and to honor this trust that they've been given, and to provide food for folks in this country and around the world. So that's how they view their vocation. Mm-hmm. And then we also have the reality, not so much I think with small farmers, but with red meat, as you know better than I, that's pretty, it takes a lot of energy and resources and water and everything to do. So how then do we care for the climate and creation that's entrusted to all of us, and also honor the vocations of the farmers and the ranchers? That was a really tense time right after the Meatless Monday suggestion.
Well, this is Pastor Vance. The other part is that you have to spin it all the way around when you're looking at it.
Mhm.
The things that we have trouble in Midwest, and neither one of y'all mentioned Kansas or Iowa, but Kansas was always a farming state. The Swedes landed in the middle of where Lynchburg was, where I went to college.
You went to Lynchburg?
Yeah, I was in.
I didn't know you went to Bethany. You're a Swede.
Yeah, I am.
No, I even got a T-shirt.
But one of the challenges has been the migrant workers that have found themselves in the middle of Iowa and in the middle of other the Midwest cities, and then find themselves being abused. And how do we deal with the workers? And the other challenges that in Chicago in particular, we're doing a lot of what they call urban agriculture.
Right.
A lot of the land has been devastated by some of the lead and other things that are going on. And so we do urban gardening on the south side of Chicago, and are really trying to move into figuring that stuff out, not only teaching healthy eating, healthy groups and so forth, because of the diabetes and the other health disparities that people of color are faced with. So this is a great discussion, because there are all kind of ways to spin it to help us to understand this is a broader concept that we need to kind of go at. And also, when I grew up in Cleveland, but then also the last parish I served was in Ashtabula, which is a small city on Lake Erie. But when major industry had moved out, they just left. We had brownfields. And we know that has in Chicago on the South Side, and that's usually happens in communities of color, because they don't have the political clout. It's not happening, for example, in Arlington Heights. But then how can the remediation happen in those brownfields so that they can be turned into urban gardening? That's really important. You're so correct.
I've been praying for Detroit since we had the youth gathering there. They have empty lot after empty lot as they're cleaning up all their vacant buildings, but they have a unique opportunity to show the world how to do urban agriculture, because they have full city blocks that are just vacant and there to be made green in some way or other. That's going to help in so many ways. And then you have somebody like Venus Williams in Milwaukee with Alice's Garden, which they do both the gardening, but they also get the herbs and they sell the seeds. But they're and even in Detroit, in that Michigan area, there are some wonderful gardens that are coming out of that. But they're really pilot programs that model for other areas to look at and say, this is what we can do, or we do it in a different way. So no, you're absolutely, they're wonderful signs and wonders that we see. We just have to figure out how to help people understand that this is possible. One of the things with Carter G. Woodson and not only Carter G. Woodson, but George Washington Carver, which I saw when I was growing up driving through the South, where you couldn't stop because there were restrooms wouldn't allow us, or hotels wouldn't allow us to go across I-10. But when we went to the agriculture at Tuskegee, which, if you know Tammy Jackson, she's a graduate of Tuskegee Institute. But one of the things about Tuskegee was this issue with George Washington Carver and the peanut farmer, because the cotton had deprived the land. They had to replant peanuts and sweet potatoes and those kind of crops in order to replenish the land. And that was the reason that they could be able to sustain themselves, particularly black farmers in the South and so forth. There's a wonderful, rich history throughout the United States, and the Lutheran Church is right in the middle of all that. We really do need to integrate the environmental kind of discussion about how do we do and on the South Side, when we have a crop, we bring it to the altar and we bless it and we give it to the community free, because we want people to eat healthy, and that's the way we work that. So
yeah, and I think you raise another thing, Pastor, that I think for most probably white people, the Black farmer is invisible. And now I know that there's in part of this, the relief package, or part of the infrastructure package that the Biden administration is trying to get through, is significant aid for Black farmers. and it's getting some pushback by the Republicans.
Barbara has a question.
No, I just wanted to say, Booker, thank you so much for calling this signs and wonders when we see urban gardens, because I know I'm working with Faith in Place somewhat, and they talk about the urban gardening, the rain gardens. And, you know, it's easy to think our little efforts are just so little, but for you to say these are signs and wonders, I think this is a kind of, I'm working out with this idea of pocket eschatology, where we can live as pockets of the future, and we bear witness by being little pockets. And that's the signs and wonders. So thank you. It wasn't a question, it was just thanking.